Hi Krishna, welcome to the Vedic Inquirer. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you might happen to be in the world. It's been a long time since we last had a conversation. I'm delighted to be welcoming Sanaka Rishi Prabhu, who's in transit at the moment, so our apologies for the delayed start. Hopefully you all know Sanaka. Sanaka's been a campaigner for child protection for a good 10 or 15 years. And I did suggest that we might ask you, Sanaka, how on earth do you keep going?
Oh, Hari Bolo, Hare Krishna. Thank you for having me, Damodar. I want to, before I start, I want to apologize to everybody for my delay. I just got off a flight and I miscalculated the time zone adjustment, and that's what happened. I really apologize. Why do I keep going? There is this beautiful quote by Srila Prabhupada where he says that the protection of children, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't know it by heart. I want to, if I find it, I'll put it in one of the comments. But Prabhupada says the protection of children offers the best chance of liberation from the bondage of samsara. And for me, it has been very much a part of my spiritual journey, this self-discovery, but also understanding. It's been so many challenges, and I find the motivation for me is in trying to give voice to those who don't have one. I have some idea of what it's like to be in a situation where you're suffering and where you don't have anybody to go to, nobody listens, you don't have a voice. And it's really something that all Vaishnavas should have the compassion, have the understanding that it is not acceptable. We need to put an end to it. For me, people ask me, how do you do it? And for me, I feel like asking back, why are you not doing it? And not specifically to you, Damodar, but to me, that's often the reply that comes to me. It's like, how can you stand by and mind your own business when you know that devotee children are suffering? It's like, how do you think that's going to affect your spiritual life, their spiritual life, the society we live in? And anyway, long answer, but these are some of the motivations that.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji, and certainly we're grateful, and you certainly inspired me to get involved. Yeah, we have to endeavor, even without necessarily attachment to getting an immediate result. It's scary how difficult it appears to be to do something or achieve something so obvious, which is to make a safer provision for children. Arguably, we are at a glacial pace making things better for children, but there's still some shocking attitudes that are out there. And it's particularly disappointing that the society's leadership seems so primitive in its responses. It would appear to be one of the most important strategic priorities, to successfully inculcate Krishna consciousness in future generations and set them up for productive lives. And it's kind of bizarre that, a lot of the leaders are more interested in erecting buildings or just being, the marquee speaker at an event or something. All right, well, let's have a look at what our focus is today. We want to look a little bit at the history of the CPO and how that informs recent events. We know in early December, I think you broke the news on the Vedic Inquirer that we'd heard through the grapevine that there were some moves afoot to get rid of Kamalesh Krishna and Gandavika as the CPO leads. Interestingly, it was followed up by a very quick, uncharacteristically quick message from the GBC. No, it's all false news. No, we're not doing this. And we've got a committee and it's all being very proper. We can look at some of that communication as well. And then you've just recently made this video, of course. So let's talk just a little bit of background, the history. So 1998, the CPO was created. Dhiragovinda Prabhu was at the helm for 6 years. This came off the back of the Turley case, and clearly it was sorely overdue, sorely needed, and actually had a decent operating budget, 160 grand a year. After about 6 years, Dhiragovinda Prabhu felt he'd put in a good innings, and that he was now dealing with so much interference that it just sort of sapped his life. I don't know if you want to say something, because obviously Dhiragovinda's a well-known friend to us both.
I think it's important. Yes, I do want to talk about Dhiragovinda, but I also want to say that it's important to recognize that most of the official GBC ISKCON efforts towards child protection, they've all come as a consequence of, they were never proactive, they were always reactive. It was never, as far as I'm aware, and obviously I'm not, there may be things I don't know, obviously, but as far as I'm aware, ISKCON's effort have always been reactive, which means when there was when there was a threat, when there was a lawsuit, when there was some external pressure, whether it was media, finances, then they say, oh, we've got a child protection is a crisis all of a sudden. How do we put out this fire? So the consciousness has always been, how do we make the problem go away? It was like, but the problem was never child protection. They've known about child abuse for 40 years at least. They've never done anything. They've only ever intervened when it became such when it became a disturbance to them, essentially. So I think the problem is that we came to this from the wrong. ISKCON as a society has always approached child protection with the wrong consciousness. It's never been child-centered. It's never been, oh my God, our children are getting abused. That's outrageous. How is that possible? We need to do everything in our power to prevent that and to protect them and to shelter them, because ISKCON's survival as a society depends on that. And it's horrific that our own children are being abused. There was never that consciousness, never in the past, and it's not there today. So So essentially, the problem is one of consciousness. We don't have a child-centered consciousness. Our children are not valued. And until that changes, all these efforts that are made, the objective is never going to be, how do we protect our children? That's not going to be the finality of the efforts. The efforts are always going to be, how do we get Sanaka to shut up? How do we make this media, how do we handle this media crisis? Or how do we handle the Turley case? And so then, unless we are able to go back somehow to the root of the problem, and that's a collective shift in consciousness, not just because, yes, the leaders are very much part of it, but the leaders also do what the society asks of them. So unless we, as a society, we start to value our children, that's the leaders, in a way, they are also the product of our collective consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's,
sorry, go ahead.
You continue.
No, I was just going to go back to where you started with Dhiragovinda and the CPO, and it's like, if you thought, every time I've talked to Dhiragovinda and I've listened to him talk about the issue, it was a very frustrating experience. He says it was very rewarding because it's a priceless service to Srila Prabhupada's movement, to Vaishnava, to Vaishnavas, Vaishnava children. But he always expresses his frustration because there was never support. There was always favoritisms. He even wrote an article that was published in the Sampradaya Sun about favoritisms in the adjudication process. I don't remember the exact title, but essentially what he was saying is, whenever we have a situation where the protection of children conflicts with the agenda of some leaders, then child protection it becomes a secondary thing. It's relegated to second. It gets second priority, and whoever this high profile offender is, he gets the full protection of the GBC body, of this whole machine that is the institution of ISKCON, and the children are kind of like sidelined in their protection, obviously. And that hasn't changed. In this was, Dhir Govinda retired and he resigned.
2006.
I think it was 2004.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Started in 98 to 2004. He retired in 2004, and things haven't changed. There's that consciousness is very much alive and well. Children are not the priority. The protection of children is not the priority. It's not. It's like, how do we deal with this child abuse problem in a way that it's not a problem to us, so that we don't hear about it? That's kind of how their actions. That's what their actions tell us.
So, and at the risk of just, abbreviating the history, immediately post Dhir Govinda, there were a couple of successive child protection directors who, let's say, were a little bit more favorably disposed towards the GBC agenda. I don't, know if we want to get into details and names, but certainly a lot of parents and a lot of victims were very dissatisfied that their cases were not being given due consideration, sometimes just disappeared altogether, and so on. And that brings us, then through till about 7 years ago, when Kamlesh, Krishna and Ganda got the roles. Did you want to say anything about those other two intermediate directors?
For me, so after Dhir Govinda, Damodar took over, and that was my first. And in 2006, I decided, after a lot of personal introspection and battles, I finally decided it really doesn't sit well with me that Gauri Das is a temple president of the manor. I want to do something about it. So I decided to really spearhead that case. And that was my first real exposure to the problems with the CPO system as it was, because I interacted with Damodar. And it was interesting because as I began that journey, and it was quite a complex and long experience, but as I started, my objective initially was, I want some justice. It's not right that Gauri is a temple president, and that something needs to be done about it. And as I went through the process, and I became aware of the corruption, and how I saw Damodar really stack the cards in favor. He was very much trying to discourage us. There was like 20 of us. He was trying to discourage us. He was doing all sorts of things to favor Gauri. And then the thought really hit me. It's like, I'm a 30, I don't know how old I was at the time. I was 30 something. I'm a 30-year-old man, and yes, I would like to get some justice, because it really bothers me. But it's not a matter. My safety is not at stake, and I'm having such a difficulty experience in trying to get some basic justice from the CPO. And the thought hit me, what would happen if a 5-year-old child went to the CPO today and said, this Swami just abused me. I need help. It's like they wouldn't stand a chance. And to me, that was like something that it really bothered me. And I said, wow. So then halfway through, it wasn't about gory. It was about this system. There's something so wrong with this system. I want to really push it through just to see if it's possible to change the system even a little bit so that it actually does what it's supposed to do. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I was very successful in that, but it was, at least we were able to get some kind of recognition in the Gory case. But I do feel that we're still a long way away from the collective consciousness that is really needed to ensure the protection of the devotee children worldwide.
I believe Tamaha's successor was also stood down ultimately because of just being particularly unreliable and communicative and so on.
Yes, Champakalata took over from Tamohar, and I mean, I met her once at the manor. She seemed like a nice enough lady, but she was hopeless as a child protection director of international child protection. She was extremely ineffective. She wouldn't communicate. And then there was, for me, the biggest problem with her tenure that I'm aware of was when Sri Radha's case came up for, so Sri Radha got initially, she got a lifelong ban. And the CPO manual is very clear and specific on the requirements for an appeal. Now, Champakalata is a disciple of Indradyumna Maharaj, and Sri Radha, I believe, is also a disciple of Indradyumna Maharaj. My speculation is that Indradyumna Maharaj may have pressured Champakalata to, but I don't know. I don't know whether he did or didn't. What I do know is that Champakalata gave Sri Radha authorized an appeal for Sri Radha that she did not qualify for. She didn't meet the criteria for an appeal. And then on the appeal, they significantly reduced her restrictions to the point where they even allowed her to continue with some, how do you say, restrictions, but they allowed her to continue teaching if she wanted to, which we now know was a terrible idea after the recent revelations of what happened. But yeah. And then after Champakalata, Kamlesh Krishna took over. And when Kamlesh Krishna took over, I believe that Champakalata was actually getting a wage. I think she was getting a wage. She was getting expenses paid. She was getting $30,000 or $40,000 wage a year. And then when Kamlesh Krishna took over, all of a sudden the CPO budget went down to $10,000 a year, I think it was. And they never got a wage. It didn't even cover the running costs. The $10,000 didn't even cover the running costs of the office for the year. And when you have a multi-million-dollar society that can only afford 10 grand for the protection of their children, you know that there's a big problem there. Just that, even if I didn't know anything else, I would just look at that and it's like, well, something is really wrong here. But
of course,
yeah.
the GBC claim that their overall operating budget is very, very small. In the next breath, they talk about being the ultimate managerial authority. And we also know that many of them are independently wealthy with private residences, despite being in the renounced order of life. So it doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't add up. When I released the cost of silence, somebody gave me this idea. Why don't we ask for 1% of the TOVP money to go to child protection? And it actually went for a vote to the GBCs. and they were discussing it. And somebody sent me an email where Shivaram Swami opposed it, and he said, "Oh no, why this is an arbitrary figure? We need to have a breakdown of the expenses that the CPO needs," which in and of itself you could say was a reasonable objection. But then that was the end of it. Then it's kind of like, oh, next topic. And they never talked about it again. The CPO didn't get an extra dime. It was just the end of it. That was the end of the discussion. But going to the more, so Kamlesh, in my estimation, he's human. I'm not saying he is perfect, but in my observation, Kamlesh took the protection of children to heart. And he took the protection of children to heart to the point where he prioritized the protection of children over the requests of the GBCs, over his own career in ISKCON, because let's face it, ISKCON is a very authoritarian society. If you oppose the GBCs, you don't really have a lot of future in management. Actually, what's his name? Kumarupa Prabhu wrote something really interesting about this. He wrote this article. It's still up on the Sampradaya Sun. When Prabhavishnu Swami left, he wrote an article and he said, "Oh, I was chanting my japa. I sat next to Dharma, which was one of his bulls, and during the japa, I felt like a telepathic communication from the bull Dharma, and the bull asked me, he said, 'Have you heard the recent developments with Prabhavishnu Swami?' Not Swami, it's Prabhavishnu." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Have you noticed how in the beginning of the letter, Prabhavishnu blames the fact that he followed the instructions of the GBCs as the reason for his spiritual demise?" He said, he kept taking on more and more responsibilities that he knew he couldn't possibly manage, and eventually that destroyed his spiritual life. So then in the next paragraph, he tells his disciples to take shelter in the same GBCs that just destroyed his spiritual life. And he says, "Mark my words, Prabhavishnu," and it's funny because this letter was prophetic, because Kumarupa wrote this letter right after Prabhavishnu left. And Dharma says to Kumarupa,
"Oh no, we've lost you. Don't know if it's just at my end or it's everybody's end. Hopefully you'll connect again any moment." I might just flash up while we're waiting for him to reconnect some of the other comments that you've all been making. Thank you for doing that. Let me just scroll here. Here we go. Our children are not valued. Yet that summarizes much of the issue, but the orange-clad saffron elites are highly valued. The leaders of ISKCON have no problems with any of their material needs, having opulent housing, nice cars, servants, and evidently unlimited funds for lawsuits. But just after we started the $4 million lawsuit and we began to help the $20 million Bangalore lawsuit in 1997, then in 2001, my poor people were asking for funds for my poor shoes. I suspect that is Paranjan, Tim Lee. Doesn't look like the whole comment came through. Hopefully Sanaka will be back in shortly. This is a shocker. In Dallas, I was sent an official letter from the temple president that if we didn't retract our CPO statements, I would be banned. If we didn't drop the case and we got banned after that, the teacher was ruled as guilty. Sorry, we lost you there for a second, Sanaka, so I'm not sure
sorry,
what exact point you became aware of.
What was the last thing you heard?
You were talking about Kurma Rupa's prophetic.
Yeah, so Kurma Rupa said, so the bull Dharma tells Kurma Rupa in this telepathic, transcendental, I don't know what it was, transmission. The bull Dharma says, "Mark my words, they will very soon. Prabhavishnu will be back in the fold." And the GBC will accept him because he has done the worst possible thing for a sannyasi, but he did not do the one thing that the GBC does not forgive. He did not speak against them. So then they will let him back in. So for the GBCs, how do you say, the worst possible offense is when you antagonize them in any way. If you have an opinion that is different from them, that they really find that insufferable. So in a way, I think any director of child protection that will prioritize the protection of children over the GBC's agenda is bound to, they will take him out. And I think the real problem is that we have a society that is the leaders of the GBCs. If you look at the history, they have proved time and again that they cannot be trusted with child protection. So if you look at the track record of how GBC has handled child protection, you would say their performance is horrific. These guys should have nothing to do with child protection. So that is really the crux of the problem. As long as the Child Protection Office is under the influence of the GBCs, it's going to be very difficult for the Child Protection Office to do its job, to protect children. It doesn't matter who is going to be running it. It's going to make very minimal difference. Obviously, if there's somebody who just does whatever the GBC tells them to do, which I expect the next director is going to be somebody like that. But as long as the GBC has the power to hire and fire the CPO director, that's very much going to limit the how much protection of devoted children the CPO can do. There is no two ways about it. It's like, in my ideal world, the CPO needs to be like the BBT, which is 100% independent of the GBC influence. But they are part of ISKCON, and they work in cooperation with ISKCON, with the blessings of the devotee community, of the GBCs, of the leaders. But it has to be independent, as there is no other way. The GBCs have demonstrated that they cannot prioritize the protection of children when it conflicts with their other agendas, their political considerations, whatever they are. So it's just, that's kind of where we're at.
You and I were sort of exploring where we think Kamlesh and Gandavika got offside with the GBC. Our belief is it probably started with the Lakshmi Money case. Obviously, she's a very well connected and highly thought of devotee in those circles. And without getting to the details of the case, I know that there was a lawyer who was appointed as the investigator who didn't disclose her prior relationship and affiliation with Lakshmi Money, and that eventually came out. She didn't voluntarily recuse herself. And there's another question here about just how many lawyers seem to want to side with abusers and with protecting the society's reputation and not with the interests of children. We might come back to that in a moment. Anyway, when the CPO discovered of this affiliation, they replaced her as the investigator, naturally. And from that point on, there's been this concerted campaign by many of those lawyers and by many of the GBCs. We hear, for instance, of Anutama screaming down the phone at Kamlesh and Gandava because they would not adjust their findings in the Lakshmi Money case. And we've heard that there's been pressure on them to resign ever since. And then there was this big disinformation campaign. These people don't follow due process. They're not qualified. We even had Hridayananda Maharaj interview with Vedic Inquirer a couple of years ago and, spout some of this disinformation. And even though we set him straight at the time, I'm sorry, Maharaj, you've been misinformed. They actually have, both of them, master's degrees in advanced child protection. We've never had more qualified CPO directors. Oh, no, that's not right. So this narrative, which was all about they don't follow due process, and it seems that we're just now seeing the fruition, really, the fructification of that campaign, having not been able to get them to voluntarily resign. Now suddenly we're having term limits, and you know, it looks like they'll just be brought to a grisly end, whether they like it or not. Anyway, I've said a bit there. Plenty for you to comment on.
Yeah. No, I mean, that was Radha Dasi of the Vaishnavi ministry. She's a lawyer. I don't know if she got her law degree in Stanford. She's family law, I believe. So any lawyer worth their salt and a little bit honest will immediately say, well, I can't get involved in this case because I'm biased. I am friends with Lakshmi Modi, and I can't be involved with this case. Instead, she took on the job of case manager. She was a case manager for the Lakshmi Modi case, and she discouraged several victims from submitting their testimonies, which it's not the job of the case manager to assess the testimonies. The job of the case manager is just to collect these testimonies. So anyway, she got removed, and then when the guilty verdict came out, there was Hridayananda Maharaj, Brahmatirtha, Malati, Anuttama for sure. There was a whole list of GBCs that were outraged. No, we're not okay with this. This decision doesn't align with our political agendas. You need to change that. And it's been like that for a few cases that have come up. And it's just this, every time you look at a high profile case, you can see that there are some people who, powerful people that have a lot of influence, senior devotees who attempt to really shift to use their power to defend the perpetrators. And you never see, like Hridayananda. I've never seen Hridayananda step in to defend victims of child abuse, to give money, to how do you say, to use the power of his status in ISKCON. He is one of the most senior devotees in ISKCON, and say, wow, we really need to do more. And what can we do, or fundraise or something? Instead, he comes in only when his friend. Anyway, but we're digressing. I'm conscious that we've already done a half hour, and we haven't really started talking about the
We've set the theme. Feel free to transition to the topic at hand anytime you like.
Yeah. It's for me, it's like this. I don't know who said it, but they say you can't fix a problem with the same consciousness that created the problem.
Einstein
said that. There you go. So it's that's what ISKCON has been with regards to child protection. That is precisely what ISKCON has been trying to do. If you look at all the major attempts to tackle the problem of child abuse in ISKCON, that very much applies. They use the same consciousness that created the problem, the same playbook, the same, and then they hope to somehow get a solution. And ultimately, the GBC needs to step out. Just get out of the way and let the CPO do this. And like the CPO needs maybe a board of directors. It certainly needs funding, but it needs people who are completely independent of the GBCs and whose only priority is the protection of children. Anything else is going to have, we need to take into account this political consideration. This Swami has too many disciples. This is going to make us look bad. And then every time you make an exception, then you can't prioritize child protection. If you look at what's happening with the way Kamlesh Krishna is being removed, so they said first, oh, we're introducing term limits, because he's been the only reason the GBCs have given is that he's been there 7 years, and that's too long. And like, if 7 years is too long, then we need to remove all the GBCs and replace them, because most of them have been there longer than 7 years. Like right now, the GBC have established that the CPO is the only CPO director is the only office in ISKCON with a term limit, which is, it's like, what is the purpose? Why? What is the purpose? How does that serve the protection of children?
To be fair, they do argue that some of their ministries are evaluated on X number of frequency. But the thing is, this didn't exist before. It was suddenly magically introduced.
No, I know they say that. I know they say that. But who gets to assess the performance of the GBCs, and who assesses the performance of the child protection director? Because you have the GBCs who have a terrible track record on child protection. They've enabled child abusers. They have knowingly allowed people who are confirmed child abusers to continue, like Bhaktividya Purna, to continue for years and years and years. So you have these guys who have this track record assessing the performance of the child protection director. And it's just, they're not the right people for the job. Even if you want to introduce a performance, I think it's a good thing that a director should be assessed on his performance or her performance, but you need the right people for the job. You can't have the GBCs doing that. They're not the people.
Well, there should be some clear criteria, and how he's performed assessed, transparently against that criteria. Those criteria do not exist.
Also, there is no criteria for how the new director is selected and when the new director is asked to resign. There is no criteria for any of that. It's just like when the GBCs wake up in the morning and like, this guy has annoyed us enough. Okay, let's remove him. But what they've done to Kamlesh is particularly, how do you say?
Egregious.
Yes. If you look, it's like, they did not even invite, let's say Kamlesh is not part of the team that is this committee that is selecting the new director. Kamlesh doesn't even get a voice in who is going to replace him. That's how it's so disrespectful. It's just like we completely with disregard, you don't even matter enough to have a vote in who's going to replace you. And they give a vote to Pancharatna, who's got a terrible track record on child protection, but he gets a vote and Kamlesh doesn't get a vote. It's to me, it looks like there is an intention to wipe out Kamlesh Krishna's legacy. It's like, so essentially what they want to do is set the precedent that the GBC will not tolerate insubordination. They will not tolerate somebody who will prioritize the protection of children. That is the greatest and most egregious offense you can do. So if you compare, I know they're apples and pears, but if you compare what's happening with Kamlesh and what happened with Bhaktividya Purna, what they're doing to Kamlesh is worse than what the way Bhaktividya Purna was treated, in the sense that Bhaktividya Purna was allowed to keep his legacy. His legacy, nobody has questioned his legacy. Nobody has gone and said, why are these people who were trained by Bhaktividya Purna still running a school? Nobody asked that question. But with Kamlesh, they're completely wiping out he doesn't even get a say in who is going to take on the child protection team afterwards. His whole thing is going to be negated. So it's particularly, it's like, it's shocking to watch. And I am apprehensive to see who is going to step in after who the GBC are going to put in. And
sorry, please finish.
No, go ahead.
Well, as someone who served, in the past as an HR director, there's a certain due process when it comes to deciding whether someone's fit to continue in a role or not. Typically, if you feel like there is a transparent performance shortfall, you raise that to the person's attention, you give them adequate support and training to turn it around, and a reasonable time limit to turn it around. Now, I hear that the main grievance that the GBC have is, oh, he's not a very good communicator. This is really the pot calling the kettle black. You know, the very communications department are not great communicators. In fact, if we even looked at the, as I called it earlier, uncharacteristically quick communication that came out the day after you went live with, hey, guess what? They're getting rid of Kamlesh. They suddenly felt, no, that's fake news. Yes, he's done a great job, and now it's time, 7 years, and yes, there's a committee that we're setting up. And then there's all these notes afterwards because we called them out. Like they're naming people who are members of this committee that are scratching their heads when we ask them because they say, I'm not a member of any such committee. Note, the members listed here are tentative membership. Some are yet to be confirmed. In other words, we just made it up. We just made it up to make it seem like it was all in order. If I was, you know, the HR director observing this, I know that we'd be on for a case for wrongful dismissal and breach of contract, because this is what they call in the UK, at least, constructive dismissal. We've suddenly invented some problem so we can oust somebody, and we've tried to give it this thin veneer of, you know, due process.
No, it was, I asked two of the people who were supposed to be on that panel, and they were like, no, I found out at the same time as you did that I was going to be on that panel. And that was just something that they, how do you say, they just materialized to try and legitimize and give an air of, it's like, no, it's not so bad. It's we've got a panel. It wasn't just the GBC, but to me, it just looks like a power grab. It's a hostile takeover. The problem is that when you have an office that is called the Office for Child Protection, the Child Protection Office, but in actuality, their job is to protect children. When doing so doesn't upset other GBC agendas, it's really difficult for somebody who says, yeah, I'm here to protect children. It's very difficult for them to do their job. They're not going to get the chance to do their job. They're going to be opposed every step of the way. And now I heard that now the GBCs are finally saying, oh, we're going to put in a good budget for the CPO now that we get rid of Kamlesh and Gandarvika. Now, you mentioned earlier that Kamlesh and Gandarvika have a master's in advanced child protection, but Kamlesh also works as a magistrate in London. I think that's important because some people have accused him of not understanding due process and legal due process. And like, if he works as a magistrate, he's probably got a better understanding than many. But to me, it's all to me, funding from the GBCs, it's almost worse than no funding, because now I imagine the next CPO director is going to get a wage. Is going to get $40,000, $50,000 a year from the GBCs, and his livelihood, his family is going to depend on these $50,000, and he's going to be completely beholden to the GBCs financially. His livelihood is going to depend on that. There is a quote that Govinda often mentions, and it says, it's very difficult to get a man to understand something when his paycheck depends upon his not understanding that. So if the GBCs hold the purse strings for the CPO, that's a problem. So essentially, the only way the CPO can work effectively is without the GBC. The GBC has to be completely removed. And it's funny because over the years, they've said a number of times, oh no, the CPO is completely independent. There are several official GBC statements that they say, we're not going to interfere. We're not going to interfere. Even recently with a very high profile case, which they decided to completely sideline and derail, and to make sure that they exonerated the perpetrator, even after they said, this is the last time, we're never going to do it again. We're never going to interfere with CPO matters. And sure enough, now they're hijacking the CPO. To me, it's like it's a hostile takeover. That's what we're witnessing right now.
When they claimed that, oh, this is fake news, you've said that we've dismissed him, but we haven't. And then they basically came through and said, really, we've taken a decision based on this committee we just invented's recommendation that he'll serve until his term limit expires at the Mayapur meetings or whatever. And then we also learned that they've already hired, prior to any assessment against any criteria, they've already hired or charged a group with finding a successor. So it's definitely a fait accompli, no matter how they want to spin it. And yes, it will be very interesting to see how it now plays out. One of the things they probably haven't thought through is that, to some extent, out of necessity, because they do need to work through the GBC and get the GBC's cooperation on things. And just to clarify what I mean by that, the CPO cannot impose any legal sanction on a person. So if it imposes any restrictions, they're restrictions that the rest of ISKCON have to acknowledge. And we've seen historically that it hasn't always acknowledged them. So that puts them in this bind of trying to work with the GBC and have a cooperative relationship. Now, if the GBC do take a hostile mood, which it appears that they're doing, and just say, we're going to get rid of you whether you like it or not, that effectively removes the muzzle. That effectively removes the cone of silence. Gandava can Kamlesh know where all the bodies are buried. So I don't know if the GBC have given much thought to that as they decide to simply unceremoniously and uncharitably exit them.
Yeah, I don't know if Gandharva and Kamlesh are going to tell us where the bodies are buried, just to follow your. I don't know if they will. It would be nice if they did, especially given how the way they've been dismissed is just like it's appalling. But I just don't see something that's always been puzzling for me is to see how short-sighted the approach of the GBCs has been. Like when you're dealing with children, you need a sattva guna long-term perspective. There is no other constructive way to deal with children, because you're talking about the people who will influence ISKCON in 50 years time. Today's children, they will be shaping ISKCON 50 years from today when we're all dead. So if you want to have an influence, if you want to shape society, tomorrow's society, you look after the children, you train children, you transmit consciousness of God, of Krishna to the children, and you raise them well, you protect them, you nourish them, you cherish them, and you teach them how to care for the society. Instead, it's like it's a suicidal approach. It's like we've been consistent. The playbook, the culture has been to disregard, trample, abuse, and neglect these children, and then they're building temples. But who are they building these temples for? There is no
vanity project.
It is, but also it's like, for me, even if the GBCs are callous materialists, and I'm not saying that they are, I'm hoping that somewhere in their heart there is some genuine desire to serve Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. But even if they were callous materialists, still the protection of children would be in their best interest. It would make them look good. It would ensure a workforce. Just from a purely materialistic perspective, child protection makes sense. To me, this destructive approach towards children and towards the future of ISKCON, it's I just cannot understand how there's so much ignorance in how child protection is approached. It just doesn't make any sense.
just to look back at a couple of other potential contributing factors to, this desire to exit Kamalesh Krishna. I'm going to be very careful how I say this. In May 2021, the GBC promised to give a very high-profile case to the CPO. It made a public undertaking to doing so, and then quietly, without announcing it, withdrew the same files and forbid the CPO to actually pursue that case. And then, as we know, we saw the video with Bhakti Chaitanya Swami doing a little deal on the side. They contrived some, some committee that would actually bypass the CPO. In fact, those two compliant CPO directors were invited to be a part of it. Dhira Govinda notably wasn't, nor was the current CPO. And then we know that the accused in that case actually was given a couple of voting members on that committee as well, astonishingly. And apparently Kamalesh Krishna was just not going to sign off on that committee's findings. So this was probably also an act of defiance that, didn't go well for him.
If you look at the at what happened in on that phone call with Bhakti Chaitanya Swami, he was saying that he basically says that he's just Kamlesh has already agreed. He's going to accept, basically,
which was a barefaced lie.
It was a barefaced lie, or at best a misunderstanding. But essentially, what he said was, "We're just going to get Kamlesh to sign off on an exoneration of
the person,
this dodgy Swami," and clearly that didn't happen. So when you have, from a political perspective, where the CPO is just a damage control from the GBCs, the way the GBCs have been interacting with the CPO, they see it as a damage control office. So it's like it needs to do what they needed to do to resolve their immediate problems. So we have this problem with this Swami. Okay, we're going to get the CPO to help us solve this. He's not doing it. We need to get rid of this guy. This guy, he's not doing what we need him to do. He's not solving our problems. He keeps putting child protection as a priority. He's got to go. And essentially that is the crux of why from what I understand, from what I've observed, the GBCs are removing Kamlesh because he's a man that prioritizes the protection of children, and he will not, he does not give in to their pressure. And it's unfortunate to me. If the GBCs had not just the GBC, but ISKCON as a society had directed the energy that has been directed to attack the Child Protection Office in the last 6-7 years, if that energy had been offered to support the Child Protection Office, essentially, so that, what does that mean? It means that if the Child Protection Office finds somebody responsible of child abuse, you don't have people like Shivaram Swami saying, "Oh, this is so unfair. We need to get rid of Kamlesh and Gandharvika. They've done a terrible thing. They got rid of my friend. We need to give a pension to my friend." I've never heard Shivaram Swami say we need to give more money to the Child Protection Office. But somehow the most notorious child abuser in ISKCON's history, somehow Shivaram Swami thinks that this guy needs a pension. It's just like mind-boggling, the ignorance that the leadership has demonstrated in dealing with.
So another nail in the coffin is possibly that he just would not facilitate or agree that India should have its own independent CPO. It's mind-boggling again that, given ISKCON India's history with child abuse and the obvious lack of qualifications, experience, and so on, that they're actually being indulged on having their own CPO that is not accountable. Now, these are the same people who basically argued that child protection itself was some kind of Apasampradaya. You don't find this in Prabhupada's books. We don't need one. We don't agree. This is all liberalism. All of that kind of nonsense. And all of a sudden now they want their own. And we know within a very short period of time, not only are they giving clean bills of health to places with very problematic abuse histories and live abusers being reinstated. Yeah, it's a real worry. Anyway, I wondered if you had anything you wanted to say about ISKCON India having its own independent CPO.
ISKCON India has by far the worst history of child abuse in ISKCON. There's no place in the world that has a history of child abuse that is as bad as ISKCON India, and as extensive, as long as ISKCON India. As you said, just recently, a couple of years ago, there was a leaked video from the ICC, which is the Indian Continental Committee, where there is the leaders of India. They're discussing how this child protection is a Western, some kind of Western woke idea, and that is not Vedic. It's like I guess for them they put it in the same box as female Diksha Guru or something. It's some kind of philosophical deviation, child protection, and it is mind-blowing that the GBC would be like, yeah, here are these guys who've got the worst history of child protection in ISKCON. They have openly said that they don't value child protection. They've said that if we're not going to let their Swami who has abused a child, if we don't let this Swami continue being Swami, continue being a guru, they're going to leave ISKCON. We're going to let these guys, we're going to give our blessings for these people to have their own independent child protection office. And it's like, how is that serving the protection of children? How does the GBC explain that decision protects the children in India? In India, you've got people like Bhakti Vikas Swami. A few years ago, I had an online back and forth of different letters where he was defending Bhakti Vidyapurna's right to beat children because whatever, it's beating children is Vedic apparently. And Bhakti Vikas Swami's got his own school in South India. And there are so many ISKCON affiliated schools in India with zero oversight. Nobody knows what's going on there. I want to mention this because it's so horrific. It's in Bangladesh for the last maybe couple of years. In Bangladesh, I've known for the last couple of years. In Bangladesh, they have 5, I think, of the top leaders, ISKCON leaders, like so the highest ISKCON leadership, 5 people in the highest ISKCON leadership in Bangladesh are involved in the abuse of children. And this is not, and when I say abuse of children, I need to be more specific. One of them is a sannyasi, and it's a proper child sex trafficking ring. Like they swap children. I can't even. It's horrific, but saying horrific doesn't really. It's not bad enough. And so the GBC for Bangladesh is Bhakti Purushottam Swami, who himself has a long history of child abuse that nobody wants to do anything about. And not just child abuse, he stole millions of dollars from ISKCON. He got caught red-handed. They gave all that information to the GBCs, and now Jayapataka Maharaj is pushing for him to become a guru. But anyway, of course, Bhakti Purushottam Swami is like, no, let's not do anything. In fact, Bhakti Purushottam Swami wants to bring in the India Child Protection Office to deal with this situation, because what are they going to do? They're just going to say, oh, this is nothing. We're just going to get rid of this. But the So the when they went to interview these children, the CPO went to interview these children. 17 children have been abused by these 5. They're monsters. You can't call them devotees. They had these children poisoned. They were like, a couple of them were in the ICU so that they wouldn't speak to the CPO. These are like, it's so demoniac what's taking place. And the GBCs are saying, oh, this, let the India CPO deal with it. And it's not just, okay, Bhakti Purushottam Swami is the GBC for Bangladesh, but the rest of the GBC is not doing anything. It's just, and to me, it's like, what do you do with this? It's, I don't have, it's so disturbing that we live in a society where people would rather hide and look the other way, hide a problem and look the other way, rather than saying, oh my God, how much, I cannot even conceive how much suffering these children are experiencing, how devastating this must be for them. We have to do everything in our power to stop this. That consciousness is just not there. Not in the leadership, not in the, I don't know. I don't know what it will take. And then you replace Kamlesh. Is the new guy going to go to Bangladesh and fight this out and make sure that I just don't see it. The most, if when they reply, when the new guy comes in, he's probably going to say, well, yeah, I think India should take care of that. And Pancharatna is going to say, yeah, I didn't see anything. The Prashadam was good, like he did with the Vrindavan report. His report on the Vrindavan Gurukul was a joke. Vrindavan there's 15 years of reports of child abuse in the Vrindavan Gurukul from that management. And Pancharatna is like, no, everything is good here. Nothing to see. Keep going. What will it take?
So, occasionally people contact us and say, look, there are some good people working on, revised practices and so on. We shouldn't just be completely pessimistic about the GBC's intentions and they're just going to put a stooge in that will take child protection backwards. What do we think of that? Is it just smoke and mirrors? Is there some mixed intent at least? What's our thinking?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think for me, I go back to what happened with the Vrindavan Gurukul in 2018. So not too long ago. Lady, I forget her name, from the CPO. She made this report, which I posted on the Vedic Inquirer some time ago. It's an investigation that was carried out over 73 days. So there was 73 days of observation, and they found something like more than 60 in those 73 days. They came across more than 60 incidents of child abuse. 8 teachers were involved. There was sexual, physical, spiritual, emotional, every kind of abuse you can imagine. So this report was brought to the GBCs in February for the GBC meetings in 2018. And the request was to shut down the Gurukul, or at least change the management. And Gopal Krishna pressured the GBCs, no, please leave it open. And so they left the Gurukula open. The GBC voted after looking at that, after saying this is, they talk about Kamlesh's performance. So the GBC saw this is the performance of these managers for the Vrindavan Gurukul. We're going to vote to keep these same managers. We're not going to introduce any kind of oversight. Nothing is going to change. So it's hard for me to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they are well-meaning. I think at best they don't care. That's my, it's funny because when maybe 10 years ago, I came out with this statement, which many people found shocking, which was, if anybody who takes the time to actually study the history of child protection in ISKCON will really struggle to see the leadership in good light. And many people found that statement to be so radical. But the truth is that the more time passes, the more I see how accurate that observation was, and it's disturbing.
Apart from us bringing this stuff to the collective awareness, given that, what we typically see is the GBC carry on regardless, it doesn't seem to matter that it creates all this massive doubt in people's minds that they're being rightly condemned and so on. Is there anything we can do other than create awareness? Is there anything that the viewers can do that might, correct the course of these things?
I don't know. I think in a way I see it as on my most generous days, I think that those among the GBC who are well-meaning, they feel overwhelmed by this. They don't know what to do. They're old. They're like, how do we fix this? This is an endless problem. Because child protection is not like fixing a sink. You call the plumber. If he fixes the problem, you expect him to fix the problem. You're paying him for that. Child protection is an ongoing problem, and it requires ongoing efforts, and you get very little glory out of it. So it's there's so much, it's so messy. So it's really difficult for people to want to dedicate themselves to that. And that's why I feel for me, it's so heartbreaking to see the GBC so readily dismiss Gandharvika and Kamlesh, because they're not going to find easily another person or people who actually have the protection of children at heart the way they do. And unless you really love this, you really have a passion for this, you cannot actually work in child protection without a passion for it, because it's such a difficult and messy situation. I mean, the way I see it is that it's not just a problem of the perpetrators. The perpetrators, for sure, but they're a symptom of the problem. Somebody like Bhaktividyapurna, he's a symptom of the problem. He's not the problem. The problem is a society that looks the other way and that enables him and defends him. So the problem is our collective consciousness. So what can we do? How do we change our collective consciousness? I don't know. It's like,
we did a little bit of looking back at factors that might have created this wave of ill will from the managers towards the CPO. I'm wondering about impending cases as well. So we already mentioned the Sri Radhe case, that's coming back around. The Kesava Bharati case, he may also enjoy support in many places. I know that Bhaktividyapurna and Idesh Vapu also had people who maybe wanted to relitigate on his behalf. And there may be others. I mean, there's actually a backlog of cases, a crazy level of backlog. And there are some quite high-ranking people in and amongst them. How much of this is potentially
it's possible that some high-profile cases are coming up, and Anuttama my guess is that Anuttama is very heavily involved in because from the beginning he's been one of the people who he donated a lot of money to the Child Protection Office, but that's like a double-edged sword, because that's kind of like his defense card. It's like when how do you say, when they say the best defense when they call you a racist is, no, I've got a black friend, I'm not racist. So to me, it feels sometimes when I look at Anuttama saying, no, I gave a lot of money to the child protection, I care about child protection, look how much money I gave, it feels almost like it's not entirely honest. And I would, his actions do not support that he is somebody who has prioritized child protection above his other political considerations. So when that's why I say when I think he has a big hand to play in this recent decision to remove Kamlesh as the director, and I don't see that. I lost it. I think that in the new cases may have something to do with it, but not necessarily. But I think the old one.
We can't know for sure, but it's just worth, putting that in people's minds that this could be a preemptive strike as much as a vengeful one.
I spoke to one of the victims of Keshava Bharati, and I was told that his case is concluded and he has been found guilty, and the victim was considering releasing this information, but we'll see. I don't know that, but as far as I understand, that case is finished.
Okay. All right. We're at 17 minutes now. I don't know if there's other things that you wanted to bring up that we haven't had a chance.
Go ahead.
Well, and we've got a few comments here that I thought we might talk to, and there might be a last call for comments if other people want to sort of join the discussion. So I'm just going to cherry pick as we go through. A comment here. Yes, it's right back to the beginning of the podcast live stream where we are talking about how children are such an important strategic priority. And yet, as you said, even just what to speak of having character and not finding it tolerable for children to suffer, even if anyone had any strategic acumen at all, it would clearly not be an area to neglect. I'm just going through and seeing what else we have. Feel free to comment across these. The conscience has always been, how do we make this problem go away? In other words, the goal is often a kind of PR kind of objective as opposed to doing the right thing by children. Someone here saying we need to be more child-centered, and that would be a sign actually of a healthy society.
But you know what? There's so much about this concept of child-centered. Our gurukulas are not child-centered. The purpose of our gurukulas, I'll reword it. I have never seen a gurukula that I thought, okay, I can see that this establishment, the purpose of this establishment is the protection, the education, and the upbringing of children. Children have always been a means to an end. Like when I was in Vrindavan Gurukul, we were a means to an end. The establishment wasn't there to serve the children. The children were there to serve Damodar and this teacher and so many other things. And I don't know if the Vrindavan Gurukul now, I don't know what the purpose is, if it's prestige or what it is, but the protection of children is not the objective of these establishments, and that's a problem.
Well, and yeah, we, even in terms of how the educational curriculum, I mean, we actually have a local Gurukul here at New Govardhan that I'd say educationally is really, really strong. And it does appear to be a really happy place for the kids and so on. So I think there's a lot of local initiatives. The society actually can't claim that because of some strategic input by leaders, these things are happening. It is the entrepreneurial grassroots efforts of local devotees that are making things happen. I do worry, though, that even now, the mindset of how do we set these children up for productive spiritual and material lives is not reflected in, curriculum so much. I worry that we're in many times shortchanging children and, not setting them up. Someone making the point here that the actual CPO policies and procedures pretty good. The issue is, leadership interference. And of course, these current actions by the GBC appear to show no self-awareness that there's anything they need to do differently. And it looks like it's entirely a scapegoating exercise on the child protection personnel. What else have we got?
It's 100%. Even if you look at the case of this sannyasi in India, the high-profile sannyasi in India that was just recently voted in through all sorts of. But if you look at his case from the very beginning, when it first came up in 1991, already the GBC broke every rule they had for. They already had resolutions in place for these things, and they disregarded those to favor this person. So from the very beginning, they mishandled this case, and they've continued to do so over and over and over. And it's just the enforcement of these policies is really where ISKCON is lacking, and I just don't see the political will to do that.
Just having a quick look here. Here's another one. There should be a board of directors for the CPO, maybe with 1 or 2 GBCs. I think they've really taken this ultimate managing authority, idea to heart. I think even Krishna would need their approval if he actually wanted to publish or something these days, such that they don't believe anyone could ever assess them. And I think this is a total perversion of what Srila Prabhupada had in mind. Ultimate could be taken in various ways. The final court of appeal, like the Supreme Court or something, doesn't mean authority beyond accountability. I mean, that seems like a very juvenile kind of idea, but clearly that's the one that suits them.
But also, it's so self-destructive. Authority without accountability is destructive for the individuals and for the society they run. It's like they're going to self-combust, because without accountability, any human being is going to go insane. Like when you have unlimited power with no accountability, you're going to start doing crazier and crazier things, which is what we're seeing in ISKCON.
This idea of making exceptions, of course, it could even be argued that exceptions have become the norm. In terms of it, if you're a senior person, you're definitely going to have a different adjudication maybe than you would if you were a relative nobody. The term limits are pretend. They're a plausible sounding excuse. They made them up for the moment and will forget about them just as quickly. Don't have the entirety of this quote here. It seems to have a word limit on what comes through. But dear Govinda previously talked about this culture of accountability, that he lost inspiration because of there was so much interference. The appallingly little culture of systemic accountability, and so on. GBC have a disgraceful track record. Let's just have a look, see if there's anything else. I sort of talk about the funding. Yep, the GBC may not have the centralized money, but if there's a will, there's a way. They certainly seem to be able to raise money for all kinds of vanity projects, as we spoke of. This also looks like a comment we don't have the entirety of. The book Monkey on a Stick said the GBC are known around the society as gutless wonders when it comes to addressing the problems. Of course, we know they'll be very strong when it comes to addressing us whistleblowers. We get no slack whatever, and so on. There's a couple of mentions again of this recent case, only 2 years ago, the Dallas temple. Again, trying to interfere with the verdict. CPO should be an independent legal entity. Go ahead.
No. What happened in Dallas was disgraceful. The way the temple interfered, it was essentially there is no institutional support for child protection. Not only there is no institutional support, there is institutional hostility and undermining of child protection. So to me, it's just, how can it work? Unless you change that consciousness, I just don't see how it's going to work.
Someone talking about moving their TOVB donations to CPO.
No, they have done it.
Yeah.
Who is this? This is it just comes up.
I can't see.
It just comes up as Facebook user here.
That's it. Oh, yeah, you've got to have registered or something for it to come up. Anyway, we've probably had one of the best attended sessions for a while, and the comments just keep going on. I think maybe we'll address the rest of them in the thread. Thank you so much, Sanaka, A, for the work that you do in general, B, for preparing for this. It's a long time since we've had one of these broadcasts, and I think it's very timely. And I think that historical perspective really puts what's going on currently into very sharp focus. There's lots of reasons. Even if the GBC, protest, oh, we're being unfair, we should cut them some slack, they really are genuinely want to do something. The fact is they've acted in such an untrustworthy way for so many decades, and they obviously are going about this in the usual kind of ham-fisted manner, that of course, there's massive doubt as to the rightness of their actions and the probity of what they're doing. And I guess we await now with bated breath to see what does in fact happen at the GBC meetings when Kamlesh's apparent term limits come to an end. Hopefully Kamlesh and Gandava can take some solace from the amount of appreciation that's also been expressed here for the wonderful job that they have done over these years. And we can only hope that we do get future CPO directors who can do, the same and better. Any final thoughts from you, Sanaka, before we sign off?
The thing is that it would take a miracle. It really would take a miracle for the next CPO director to be somebody who prioritizes child protection. So for the GBCs to select somebody who will prioritize child protection over the GBC's agendas, it would take a miracle for that to happen. But even if that did happen, unless there is financial, social, cultural support for the protection of our children. And that means that as individuals and as a society, we are willing to pay the price that we have to pay to protect our children. And I'm not just talking about money. It means that if my friend it comes out that my friend was abusing children, I'm not going to go against the office that is trying to protect children just because I'm upset that my friend got found guilty. I will, as hard as it is, I will support that decision because I understand that every time I undermine something like that, I'm undermining the ability of this office to protect children. Unless that consciousness changes, then even if we get another very qualified child protection, which is highly unlikely if it gets selected by the GBCs, but even if that did happen, they're going to be very limited in how much they can actually do. They need the support of the society and the leadership, and which mean, I just don't. So frustrating. And I want to again apologize for messing up the time. I was hoping I would get at least an hour sleep. I'd miscalculated before this, so I apologize if I'm not very sharp and focused.
No, you did great, and thank you for all that you do, Sanaka. I'll thank all of our viewers as well for tuning in, and again, yes, apologies for the rescheduling. Please do share this if you feel like there are things discussed here that would be good to be brought to other people's attention. The whole idea, I think, of the Vedic Inquirer is to try and get as much of the content that we produce here to do the rounds, because no matter whether people think it's truly effective or not, there's no doubt that the noise that we've been making is actually getting in the ears of the GBC. I suspect that there's at least a little bit more focus on child protection now, even if it's still going through the perverted motivations. But at least we can't ignore the fact that the eyes are on them. Sorry, Sanaka.
No, I think that raising awareness, making noise is important, but it something feels like that we need a paradigm shift, because what we're doing now is we are essentially the GBCs operate on a crisis management style. That's how they operate. When a fire is big enough, they will say, okay, what do we need to do to lower this fire a little bit? So what we're doing is we're creating fires, hoping that it's enough of a disturbance that they will do something. But really what we need is a paradigm shift, a shift in consciousness, where we get the GBCs and the society at large to understand that it is in everybody's best interest to prioritize the protection of these devotee children, spiritually, materially, every which way you look at it, it just makes sense.
On that profound note, I wish everybody a happy weekend and talk again soon. Sanaka, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Damodar. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.